The story begins with Buck, a large and exuberant St. Bernard Scotch Collie mix, living a comfortable and pampered life in Santa Clara, California during the late 19th century. Buck is owned by Judge Miller, a wealthy man who provides him with a life of ease. Buck enjoys the vast estate, roaming freely, and receiving ample affection from the family and servants. His life is characterized by luxury, as he has no need to concern himself with survival or hardship. Despite his large size and occasional mischief, Buck is kind-hearted and well-loved by everyone on the estate. However, Buck's idyllic life takes a sudden and violent turn when he is kidnapped by a gardener who, desperate for quick money, sells him to dog traders. At the time, the Klondike Gold Rush in the Yukon has created an enormous demand for sled dogs, and strong, large dogs like Buck are especially prized for their strength and endurance. Buck is shipped north, far from the sunny, warm climate of California, to the cold and treacherous wilderness of the Yukon. He finds himself shackled and transported in a cargo hold with other dogs, treated as nothing more than a commodity. For the first time in his life, Buck experiences cruelty and harsh treatment at the hands of humans. Upon his arrival in the Yukon, Buck is beaten into submission by a dog handler using a club, a brutal lesson that introduces him to the law of club and fang, the rules that govern the wild. His defiance and spirit are momentarily broken, as he learns that brute force is often used to control and dominate in this harsh new world. But Buck's resilience is strong, and despite the cruelty he faces, he begins to adapt to his new environment. His journey north marks the beginning of a profound transformation, where he will be forced to rely on instincts buried deep within him. Buck is purchased by Perrault and Francois, two French-Canadian mail carriers who run a dog sled team tasked with delivering mail across the vast frozen landscape of the Yukon. Buck joins a pack of sled dogs that are already well-versed in the hard life of pulling heavy loads over long distances in the biting cold. Among the team is Spitz, the lead dog and a fierce, dominant animal who rules the team with aggression and intimidation. Buck's introduction to the sled team is difficult, as he struggles to learn the intricacies of sled work and find his place within the group. Over time, Buck begins to acclimate to his new life. He learns the routine of pulling the sled, responding to commands, and working in harmony with the other dogs. His strength and stamina make him a valuable asset to the team, and he gradually earns the respect of the other dogs. However, the tension between Buck and Spitz continues to grow, as Spitz views Buck as a rival and potential threat to his authority. The other dogs, too, sense a shift in the dynamics of the team, with many of them quietly siding with Buck, whose strength, intelligence, and growing confidence make him a natural leader. The rivalry between Buck and Spitz comes to a head when they face off in a brutal fight for dominance. The climactic battle takes place after a chase through the snow, where the tension between the two dogs boils over. Though Spitz is a formidable opponent, accustomed to fighting and leading, Buck's burgeoning instincts, strength, and determination ultimately give him the upper hand. Buck defeats Spitz in the fight, and while Spitz disappears into the wilderness, it is implied that he succumbs to his injuries, marking the end of his reign as the lead dog. With Spitz gone, Buck assumes leadership of the sled team. Under Buck's guidance, the team becomes more efficient and cohesive. His leadership is different from Spitz's harsh, dictatorial style. Buck leads with strength, but also compassion and understanding, which earns him the loyalty and admiration of the other dogs. Together, they continue to carry out their duties for Perrault and Francois, delivering mail across the unforgiving terrain with increasing success. Unfortunately, this period of relative stability and success is short-lived. The mail delivery service is shut down due to the expansion of more modern transportation methods, and the sled dogs are no longer needed. Perrault and Francois, who have grown fond of Buck and the team, are forced to sell them. Buck and his fellow sled dogs are sold to a group of inexperienced gold seekers, Hal, Mercedes, and Charles, who are ill-prepared for the challenges of the Yukon wilderness. Hal is a cruel and reckless man, driven by greed and an unrealistic vision of striking it rich in the gold fields. He treats the dogs as tools, pushing them beyond their limits, with little regard for their health or well-being. Mercedes, Hal's sister, is emotionally fragile and completely unsuited for the harsh environment. Her constant complaints and emotional outbursts only serve to make the journey more difficult. Charles, her husband, is passive and ineffectual, offering little help as their situation spirals out of control. The group sets out into the wilderness, but their lack of experience and preparation quickly leads to disaster. They overload the sled with supplies, fail to ration their food, and drive the dogs without sufficient rest or sustenance. Buck and the other dogs suffer terribly under their leadership, growing weaker by the day. Hal's incompetence and arrogance cause tensions to rise, and the group becomes more desperate as they continue their ill-fated journey. The situation reaches a critical point when the group arrives at a cabin belonging to John Thornton, an experienced outdoorsman who lives a solitary life in the wilderness. Thornton, who has withdrawn from society after the death of his son, recognizes that Hal, Mercedes, and Charles are in no condition to continue their journey. At this moment, Thornton steps in and rescues Buck, cutting him loose from the sled team and saving his life. Hal, Mercedes, and Charles continue on their journey, ignoring Thornton's warnings, and their fate is sealed when they fall through the ice, perishing in the frigid waters. Buck, now in Thornton's care, begins a new chapter in his life. Thornton nurses Buck back to health, and the two form a deep bond built on mutual respect and companionship. Thornton, still grieving the loss of his son, finds solace in Buck's presence, while Buck experiences for the first time what it means to be truly loved and cared for. Their relationship is one of profound connection, and Buck remains loyal to Thornton, accompanying him on his adventures into the wilderness. As Buck spends more time in the wild with Thornton, he begins to experience a pull toward nature that he cannot ignore. He frequently encounters a pack of wolves in the nearby forest, and though he initially keeps his distance, he is drawn to their world, sensing a deeper connection with the wilderness. His dreams are filled with visions of a large, powerful wolf, symbolizing the call of his primal instincts. These visions represent Buck's internal struggle between his loyalty to Thornton and his growing desire to return to the wild. Thornton and Buck eventually set out on a final adventure together, venturing deep into the uncharted wilderness, far from the gold rushers and the remnants of civilization. They discover a beautiful and untouched valley, a place of peace and serenity where they can live free from the greed and violence of the world they left behind. For a time, Buck and Thornton find happiness in this remote paradise, living in harmony with nature. However, Buck's connection to the wild continues to grow stronger. He spends more time with the wolves, becoming increasingly attuned to the rhythms of the natural world. Though he always returns to Thornton, it becomes clear that Buck is being called to something greater, a life beyond the control and influence of humans. Tragically, Buck's time with Thornton comes to an end when a group of gold hunters arrives in the valley, seeking treasure. Thornton is killed in the ensuing confrontation, leaving Buck devastated. In a moment of grief and rage, Buck attacks the men, driving them away and avenging Thornton's death. Thornton's loss marks the final severance of Buck's ties to the human world. With no remaining connection to the life of men, Buck fully embraces the call of the wild. He joins the wolf pack and becomes their leader, completing his transformation from a domesticated pet to a powerful and free creature of the wilderness. Buck has answered the call that has been building within him since his arrival in the Yukon, and he finds peace and fulfillment as a leader of the pack. Though he has left behind the world of humans, Buck's legacy endures in the region. He becomes a legend, a symbol of the wild spirit that lives within all creatures. His story is one of survival, strength, and the inexorable pull of nature, reminding us of the deep and powerful connection between man, animal, and the untamed world.